The busy airport terminal hummed with impatience, but for James and Isabella Matthews, the noise faded to a dull roar, replaced by the sharp, condescending voice of the gate agent. "These tickets are cheap," the woman sneered, her eyes raking over their simple clothes. "You sure you're in the right place?" Isabella's hand tightened on her husband's arm. James just stood there, quiet, his expression unreadable. But behind that calm, a storm was gathering. The agent had no idea she wasn't just mocking a passenger. She was mocking the one man who could buy the very plane she was standing next to. And he was about to do something much, much worse. The chaos of New York's JFK International Airport was a familiar kind of symphony. Travelers dragged roller bags, business executives barked into phones, and the scent of Cinnabon and stale coffee hung thick in the air. James and Isabella Matthews moved through the crowd with an easy, unhurried pace. They were flying from JFK to London Heathrow, a route they'd taken dozens of times, but today felt different. They weren't dressed for attention. James, a man whose quiet intensity often filled boardrooms, wore a simple black hoodie, comfortable joggers, and a pair of nondescript sneakers. The only hint of his true status was a Patek Philippe watch, mostly hidden beneath his sleeve. Isabella, his wife, a brilliant architect and philanthropist, wore an elegant but understated cashmere knit set. They looked, to the casual observer, like a regular couple, perhaps embarking on a long overdue vacation. They looked comfortable. To the wrong kind of person, comfortable looked like cheap. They approached the dedicated first-class check-in line for Transatlantic Air, or TAA. The line was short, but the woman managing the counter seemed determined to make the process as long as possible. Her name tag read Karen, and she wore it like a badge of dubious honor. She was currently berating a flustered-looking man in a suit about his baggage weight. When the man finally scurried away, Karen cast her gaze on James and Isabella. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan, from their shoes to their faces, and her lips curled into a faint sneer. "Economy check-in is all the way over there, folks," she said, not even bothering to look up from her screen, gesturing vaguely toward the serpentine queue across the terminal. James stepped forward, placing their passports on the counter. "We're flying first," he said, his voice calm and level. Karen's head snapped up, her expression a mix of surprise and immediate suspicion. She snatched the passports and began typing, her fingernails clacking aggressively on the keyboard. "Matthews," she muttered. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowed. "Well, this is, unusual." "Is there a problem?" Isabella asked, her tone polite but firm. Karen finally looked at them, a sickly sweet smile spreading across her face. "Oh, no problem." "Exactly. It's just, this is a full-fare, top-tier, first-class booking. Corporate account." She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial and deeply insulting whisper. "You must have won a fantastic contest. Good for you." Isabella bristled, her back straightening. "We didn't win anything. We paid for our tickets." Karen let out a short, barking laugh. "Of course you did, dear. Of course." She tagged their bags with an unnecessary roughness, practically throwing them onto the conveyor belt. "Well, your lucky tickets are processed. But I should warn you," she added, her eyes glinting with malice. "This type of promotional ticket is basic first. It doesn't include access to our Horizon Lounge. You'll have to wait at the gate with everyone else." This was a blatant lie. Their tickets were J-Class, the highest available, and included every amenity TAA offered. James knew this. Karen knew this. But Karen was counting on them not knowing. "I believe our tickets do include lounge access," James said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "The system says otherwise. Karen snapped, her smile vanishing. "The computer is very clear. Your tickets are, let's call them, first class light. You get the seat, but not the perks. Now, if you'll please step aside, you're holding up my real premium passengers." Behind them, a man in a shiny Armani suit cleared his throat impatiently. Isabella was about to argue, to pull up the booking on her phone and demand to see a manager. But James put a hand on her arm. He gave her a look that said, "Not yet. It's not worth it." He simply nodded at Karen. "Thank you for your assistance. Have a good day." Karen's smirk returned, triumphant. "You too. Enjoy the gate." As they walked away, Isabella was fuming. "James, why did you let her speak to us like that? First class light? She invented that. She profiled us, plain and simple." "You're right," James said, guiding her toward the security checkpoint. "She did. So why didn't we do anything?" "Because," James said, his eyes darkening slightly, "you don't correct a fool in the middle of their performance. You wait for the finale. Let's go through security. I have a feeling this isn't over." They cleared security and found themselves in the main departure hall. James glanced at the sign for the TAA Horizon Lounge. "She said we couldn't go in," Isabella said. "She said that." "But our tickets say otherwise," James replied. He pulled out his phone, opened the TAA app, and showed his wife the digital boarding passes. Emblazoned on them were the words, "Horizon Lounge Access." "That woman," Isabella whispered, shaking her head. "Come on," James said, a small, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "Let's go get a coffee. I think it's time we tested the system." They walked to the elegant frosted glass doors of the Horizon Lounge and presented their passes to the attendant at the desk. The attendant, a polite young man, scanned them without issue. Beep. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Matthews," he said with a genuine smile. "Please come in. Can I offer you some champagne?" "Just coffee for now, thank you," James said, pointedly glancing back toward the check-in counters. But Karen was thankfully out of sight. As they stepped into the plush, quiet sanctuary of the lounge, Isabella felt a small victory. But the feeling wouldn't last. They had bypassed the minion, but they were now entering a different part of the jungle. And the woman who had lied to them was not done with them yet. The TAA Horizon Lounge was an oasis of beige leather and hushed conversations. Men and women in expensive, stiff business attire typed furiously on laptops and spoke in low, important tones about Q4 projections and leveraging assets. James and Isabella, in their comfortable travel wear, might as well have been wearing neon signs. They found a quiet corner, settling into armchairs that were likely worth more than a used car. The atmosphere was chilly. They received more than a few sideways glances, the kind of up-and-down assessment that silently calculates your worth and finds it lacking. A lounge attendant, who had just been fawning over a woman with a large Louis Vuitton tote, walked directly past James and Isabella, pointedly ignoring their empty table. "It's not just her," Isabella murmured, stirring a sugar packet into her coffee. "It's the whole environment." "It's a bubble," James agreed, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the planes on the tarmac. "And they don't like it when they think someone's pricked it." Isabella sighed and stood up. "I'm going to get a bottle of water. Do you want anything?" "No, I'm fine." Isabella made her way to the self-serve refreshment bar. As she was returning, carefully balancing her water and a small plate with a croissant, a man standing near the entrance suddenly stepped backward, without looking, right into her path. His name was Alan Thompson, and he was a mid-level executive who dressed like a CEO. He was busy trying to impress a colleague, gesticulating wildly as he talked. He slammed directly into Isabella, knocking the water and the croissant from her hands. The water bottle hit the carpet, but the hot coffee she'd been holding earlier, a fresh cup she'd grabbed, splashed forward, right onto the man's pristine, tan Gucci loafers. "Ah!" he yelped, jumping back as if he'd been electrocuted. "My shoes! Look at what you've done! These are suede!" Isabella was mortified, but also annoyed. "You backed into me, sir. I'm so sorry, but you weren't looking. I wasn't. Don't you dare blame me!" Thompson barked, his face turning a blotchy red. The entire lounge went silent, all eyes turning to the commotion. "You probably don't even know what these cost. This is exactly what happens. Just letting anyone in here." The implication hung in the air, thick and ugly. "You people." And then, as if summoned by the scent of prejudice, a new figure appeared. It was Karen, the check-in agent. She must have been rotating positions or coming to deliver new manifests to the lounge desk. Her eyes lit up with a venomous, I-knew-it expression. "Sir, is there a problem here?" she asked, directing her question entirely to Alan Thompson, completely ignoring Isabella. "Yes, there's a problem," Thompson sputtered, pointing at Isabella. "This woman just threw her coffee all over my $200 shoes. She's ruined them." "I did not throw it," Isabella protested, her voice rising. "You stepped back into me." Karen held up a hand to silence her, a gesture of pure, dismissive power. "Ma'am, I've already had to speak to you once today. Now you're in here, disturbing our actual premium passengers." "Actual passengers?" Isabella repeated, her voice dangerously low. "That's right," Karen said, her chin high. "I knew your tickets were suspicious. You've clearly come in here to bother people, and now you're damaging property. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the lounge. In fact, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the terminal. I'm cancelling your tickets." This was such a profound, shocking overreach of power that Isabella was momentarily stunned into silence. "You're... what?" "You heard me. Teillet has a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of its guests. You've been aggressive, and now you've assaulted Mr. Thompson," the man supplied, puffing up with self-importance. "Mr. Thompson. So you can either walk out of here quietly, or I can call Port Authority police and have you escorted out. Your choice." It was at that moment that James stood up. He hadn't moved during the initial confrontation, just watched. But now he moved with a chilling slowness. He walked over, not to Karen, but to Mr. Thompson. "Are you all right, sir?" James asked. Thompson, seeing James's simple hoodie, scoffed. "Am I all right? She ruined my shoes." "She did," James said, nodding slowly. "And my wife is always one to take responsibility. She will, of course, pay to have them cleaned. Or, if they are ruined, she will replace them." "Isn't that right, Isabella?" Isabella, confused, just nodded. "Yes, of course." James turned to Alan Thompson. "So, if you'll just give us your business card, we will have our assistant contact you on Monday to arrange for the replacement. A pair of Gucci loafers, suede, tan, size 10? Thompson looked thrown. "Ah, yes, size 11. Size 11. "Noted," James said. He then turned his cool gaze to Karen. His voice dropped, losing all its manufactured politeness. "Now, as for you." Karen's smirk wavered, just a fraction. "You are Karen Miller, check-in supervisor. You falsely informed us that our tickets did not include lounge access. You are now falsely accusing my wife of assault, based on the word of a man who wasn't looking where he was going, and you have threatened to unilaterally cancel our paid, non-refundable full-fare tickets, which is a material breach of contract. You have done all of this, I can only assume, based on the fact that you do not like the color of our skin, or perhaps just the comfort of our clothes." The lounge was so quiet you could hear the ice shifting in a glass across the room. "Now, that's not..." Karen stammered, her authority bleeding away under his direct, icy stare. "Here's what's going to happen," James continued, his voice a low command. "You are going to apologize to my wife. You are going to apologize to Mr. Thompson for escalating this, rather than de-escalating. And then you are going to return to your post, and we are all going to wait for our flight, which we will be boarding." Karen looked from James's face to Isabella's, and then to the circle of watching passengers. She was trapped. She had overplayed her hand and been called on it by someone who, despite his appearance, spoke with an unnerving, articulate power. But she wasn't defeated. She was enraged. "I apologize," she gritted out, the words tasting like acid, "for the misunderstanding." She shot a final, hateful glare at James. "But you just wait. This isn't over. I'm noting this incident. I'm noting it all." She turned on her heel and stormed out of the lounge, her face a mask of thunder. Alan Thompson, realizing he was no longer the center of a sympathetic crowd, but rather the cause of an ugly scene, quickly took a step back. "Well, I suppose it was an accident. Forget the shoes." "We will not forget," James said, locking eyes with him. "You will be compensated. We are not the kind of people who shirk our responsibilities." Thompson just nodded, unnerved, and retreated to his corner. James turned to Isabella and gently brushed a stray crumb from her shoulder. "Are you okay?" "Yes," she said, her adrenaline fading. "That was intense." "That was part one," James said, his face grim. "She's angry now, and a person like that, with a little bit of power and a lot of anger, is about to do something incredibly stupid. Let's go to the gate. I want to see this through." The atmosphere at gate B42 was thick with tension. James and Isabella had left the lounge, foregoing its hollow comforts for the plastic and steel reality of the boarding area. They sat in silence, watching as the passengers from the lounge, including Alan Thompson, began to line up. They could see Karen at the podium, her back rigid. She was speaking animatedly to another TAA employee, a tall man with a clipboard and a matching sneer. His name tag identified him as Mark, the flight's purser, or head flight attendant. Mark glanced over at James and Isabella, then looked back at Karen and laughed, a short, ugly sound. He nodded, said something, and then disappeared down the jet bridge to prepare the cabin. Whatever ailed Karen, Mark was clearly a carrier of the same disease. "They're talking about us," Isabella stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "I know," James said. He was leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at Karen. He wasn't just watching her. He was studying her. "TAA priority boarding, Group 1, first class," a disembodied voice announced over the PA. James and Isabella stood. They were, by ticket number, the first to board, 1A and 1B. They walked to the podium. Karen was waiting. The triumphant, malicious smirk was back, brighter than ever. "Good afternoon," James said, holding out his phone with the digital boarding pass. "Ah, Mr. and Mrs. Matthews. So glad you decided to—" "Wait," Karen said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. She took his phone and scanned it. "Beep! Beep! Beep!" A harsh, angry red light flashed on her scanner. The screen read, "Ticket invalid. Seat reassigned." Karen gasped, placing a hand over her heart in a mockery of surprise. "Oh, my goodness. This is embarrassing." Isabella's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "What did I do?" Karen replied, her voice rising to project to the passengers lining up behind them. "It seems you did something. After the incident in the lounge, I had to file a report, and it seems the system has automatically flagged your tickets due to passenger misconduct." "That's a lie," James said, his voice flat. There is no such system." "Are you calling me a liar?" Karen shot back, emboldened. "Are you an airline software engineer, sir? No? Then please let me do my job." "The system," she said, tapping her screen, "has corrected your promotional upgrade. It seems there was an error after all." She smiled, a predator's smile. "But don't you worry. We were able to find you new accommodations." She typed for a moment, and 2 new, flimsy paper tickets spat out of her printer. "Here you go," she said, holding them out. "Seats 45E and 45F. Enjoy your flight." 45E and 45F. On a 7-Saturn for Bislevn. That meant the dead center of the last row. Middle seats, non-reclining, right next to the galley and the lavatories. It was the worst possible assignment on the entire aircraft. It wasn't just a downgrade. It was a punishment, a deliberate, targeted, and racist humiliation. The passengers behind them were getting restless. "What's the hold-up?" someone muttered. "Just some trouble with a ticket," Karen announced loudly. Isabella looked at James. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for him to unleash the fury she knew he possessed. But his face remained a mask of impossible calm. "Ma'am," James said, pushing the flimsy tickets back toward her. "My name is James Matthews. My wife is Isabella Matthews. Our confirmed paid-for tickets are 1A and 1B. Reinstate them. Now." "I can't do that," Karen said, crossing her arms. "The computer has spoken. You have 2 choices. You can take the economy seats, or you can be removed from the airport for causing a disturbance. Your choice, and you need to make it fast, or you'll be holding up the entire flight to London." Mark, the purser, had reappeared at the end of the jet bridge, drawn by the commotion. He sauntered up, clipboard in hand. "Problem here, Karen?" he asked, though he clearly knew the whole story. "These passengers are refusing to accept their new seat assignments after they assaulted another guest in the lounge," Karen said, the lie growing bigger and bolder. Mark looked James and Isabella up and down, his gaze lingering on James's hoodie. "Right. Well," he said to James, "some people just aren't cut out for the premium experience, eh? Why don't you and the missus just trot on back to economy where you belong, and we can all get on with our day?" The 1-2 punch of Karen's bureaucratic malice and Mark's snide classism was staggering. They were trapped. The flight was boarding. The police had been threatened. They had no recourse. Isabella looked at her husband, her eyes pleading. "Do something." James met her gaze. He nodded once, a sharp, sudden movement. The calm was gone. It was replaced by something cold and absolute. "You're right," James said, his voice quiet, but it cut through the terminal noise like a razor. Karen's smile widened. "I'm glad you see—" "You're right that I need to make a choice," James interrupted. He didn't look at Karen. He didn't look at Mark. He looked past them, toward the plane. Then he pulled out his phone. He ignored Karen's protests. He ignored Mark's impatient sigh. He held the phone to his ear and spoke. "Sarah," he said. A beat of silence. "Good morning. I'm at JFK, gate B42. I need you to do something for me immediately." Karen and Mark exchanged a confused look. "I'm on TAA Flight 212 to Heathrow," James continued, his voice resonating with an authority that suddenly made several passengers stop and listen. "I need you to buy every single remaining seat in the first-class cabin. Yes, all of them. Use the primary corporate account. I want the entire cabin empty, except for my wife and me. Yes, I'll hold." The gate area fell into a sudden, shocked silence. The only sound was the whirring of the ventilation and James's impossibly calm voice. Karen's face, which had been a mask of triumphant glee, crumpled. "Sir, what do you think you're—" James held up a single finger, not even looking at her. "Don't interrupt. I'm on the phone." Mark, the purser, snorted. "By the cabin. Is he crazy? Sir, put the phone away or I will call security." "Sarah?" "Yes, I'm still here," James said, turning his back on them slightly. "How many seats are left?" 10? "Perfect. Buy all 10. Confirmation code. Excellent. Please send that confirmation immediately to—" "What's your full name, ma'am?" he asked, finally turning to Karen. She was stammering, her face turning from pale to blotchy red. Karen Miller. But sir, you can't just—" "Send it to Karen Miller, TAA's Customer Service Supervisor, at gate B42. And one more thing, Sarah. After you do that, get Mr. Harrison on the line." "Yes, that Mr. Harrison. Tell him it's an emergency regarding the Auratech contract." The name Auratech landed like a bomb. In the line behind them, Alan Thompson, the man with the Gucci loafers, went white as a sheet. "Oh my God," he whispered, so quietly only the person next to him could hear. That's James Matthews." But Karen and Mark didn't hear him. They were still staring at James, convinced he was running some elaborate, insane bluff. And then Karen's terminal pinged, and pinged again, and again, 10 times in a row. A long stream of new ticket confirmations began to print from her machine. She tore it off, her hands shaking. It was a new manifest for the first-class cabin. 1A, Matthews James. 1B, Matthews Isabella. Wife, booked, Matthews J. 2A, booked, Matthews J. 2B, booked, Matthews J. 2F, booked, Matthews J. And on and on. All 12 seats in the first-class cabin were now registered to one name. "How?" Karen whispered, the paper trembling in her grasp. James's phone chirped. "Ah, Mr. Harrison. Thank you for taking my call," James said, his voice suddenly hardening into steel. "This is James Matthews. Yes, the CEO of Auratech Solutions." Karen's knees buckled. She gripped the podium to stay upright. Mark's jaw had fallen open, his face a mask of naked, primal fear. Transatlantic Air was in the final stages of closing a $500 million deal to have Auratech Solutions, James's company, overhaul their entire global booking and logistics software. The very system Karen had claimed was automatic. "It's interesting you ask how things are going, Richard," James continued into the phone. "I'm currently at JFK, being denied boarding on your Flight 212. It seems your staff, a Ms. Karen Miller, and a Mr. Mark. What's your last name, son?" Mark couldn't speak. He just shook his head, mute with terror. "A Mr. Mark, your purser, have decided that my wife and I are not first-class material. They've accused us of assault, called our tickets cheap, and have reassigned us to the last row of economy. Yes, us. The 2 people you are supposed to be meeting in London on Monday to sign the final papers." James paused, listening. "Oh, you're getting a call on the other line. That's probably my executive assistant, Sarah. I asked her to call your board and inform them that the Auratech deal is being cancelled, effective immediately, for cause. It seems TAA's company culture is incompatible with our own. Goodbye, Richard." He hung up the phone. He slipped it into his pocket and looked at the 2 shell-shocked employees. The silence in the terminal was absolute. Every passenger, every staff member was frozen, witnesses to a corporate execution. Karen was openly weeping now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Matthews, please, I didn't know. I didn't know who you were." "That," James said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper, "is the entire problem. You shouldn't have to know who I am. I'm a passenger. I'm a customer. I'm a human being. And you, he said, pointing a finger first at Karen, then at Mark. are a disgrace to your uniforms." Mark finally found his voice, but it was a pathetic, cracking squeak. "Sir, a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. Please, we can fix this. Let me escort you to your seats. 1A and 1B. Of course." "Oh, we'll be taking our seats," James said. "But you seem to be confused. My wife and I have purchased the entire cabin, all 12 seats, so you can go ahead and board the rest of your real premium passengers," he said, glancing at Alan Thompson, "in economy. Or perhaps you can find them seats on another flight. But the first-class cabin on TAA 212 is now, officially, full." The sound that escaped Karen's throat was a strangled sob. The passengers in the premium line, the ones who had been sighing and tapping their feet, were now staring at her with pure disgust. Alan Thompson looked like he was about to faint. He knew what this meant. He and the other 8 first-class passengers were not getting on this flight. "Sir, you can't be serious," one of the other businessmen protested. "I have a meeting in London." James didn't even turn to look at him. He kept his eyes locked on Karen. "Mum, you have a new manifest. You have our boarding passes. Are you going to scan them, or would you prefer to do it from the unemployment line?" Karen's hand, slick with sweat, fumbled for the scanner. She scanned James's pass. Beep. The light flashed green. "Welcome, Mr. Matthews." She scanned Isabella's. Beep. "Welcome, Mrs. Matthews." "There," James said. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" He looked at Mark. "You're the purser. Lead the way. My wife and I would like to be seated." Mark, his face ashen, looked like a man being led to the gallows. He snapped into a grotesque parody of professionalism, his body rigid with fear. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Right this way, Mr. and Mrs. Matthews. Please, follow me." James and Isabella stepped past the podium. As they did, James paused and looked back at Karen, who was frozen, clutching the useless manifest. "One more thing, Miss Miller," James said. "My wife's trousers. They were stained by the coffee Mr. Thompson spilled on her. I trust TAA will be compensating her for them. They're Brunello Cucinelli. Have your manager send the check to my office. Tech Solutions. I'm sure you can find the address." He didn't wait for a reply. With Isabella on his arm, he walked past the stunned crowd and down the jet bridge, leaving a mushroom cloud of chaos in his wake. Behind them, the gate descended into anarchy. "What do you mean, full? I paid $8,000 for this ticket. Get your manager. Get the CEO." And all Karen could do was stand there and whisper, He is the CEO. He bought the cabin." Down the jet bridge, Mark was babbling. "Sir, I cannot apologize enough. What Karen did, it was unprofessional. It was disgusting. I got caught up. I'm not like that, I swear." James stopped just before the aircraft door. "You're exactly like that, Mark. You saw an opportunity to kick someone you thought was beneath you. You're a bully. The only difference between you and her is that she was the one with the power to change the ticket. You were just her cheerleader." Mark flinched as if he'd been struck. He had no reply. He just opened the plane door and gestured weakly. "Welcome aboard TAA Flight 212. As James and Isabella stepped onto the aircraft, the cabin crew, who had heard the commotion, were standing at attention, their faces a mix of confusion and terror. They saw Mark's white, terrified face and knew something catastrophic had happened. "Folks," Mark said, his voice trembling, "these are Mr. and Mrs. Matthews. They will be our only passengers in first class today. Please, give them anything they desire." James and Isabella turned left into the spacious, empty first-class cabin. 12 pods, arranged in a herringbone pattern, sat empty and waiting. They walked to the very front, 1A and 1B. "This is a lot," Isabella whispered, sliding into her seat, the most luxurious seat TAA offered. "It is," James said, stowing their carry-on bags in an empty overhead bin. "And it's not enough." He sat down, and Mark immediately scurried over, a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes in his shaking hands. "Mr. Matthews, can I offer you and your wife some pre-departure champagne? It's the 2008 vintage." James looked at the bottle. He looked at Mark's sweating, terrified face. "No thank you, Mark," James said. "We'll just have 2 bottles of still water." Mark's face fell. This was a rejection of the highest order. "Water. Sir, but the Dom—" "Water," James repeated, his voice firm. "And Mark, after you bring the water, my wife and I would like some privacy. We would prefer not to be disturbed for the remainder of the flight, unless we call for you." This was the ultimate punishment. A flight attendant, especially a purser, lives for service. To be told to stay away, to be rendered useless in a cabin he was supposed to command. It was a profound professional humiliation. He would have to spend the next 7 hours in the galley, knowing he was a pariah, serving 2 people who wanted nothing from him except his absence. "Yes, sir," Mark whispered, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Of course, 2 waters, coming right up." As Mark scurried away, Isabella looked at her husband. "That was perfect." "It's a start," James said. He leaned back in his seat, the door to his pod sliding closed with a soft whoosh, shutting out the world. The plane began to push back from the gate, leaving Karen, the angry passengers, and a $500 million crisis behind on the tarmac. The 7-hour flight to London was, for James and Isabella, the most peaceful they had ever experienced. They were in their own private world, a 12-seat cabin that felt like the quiet apartment of a billionaire. They watched movies on the massive screens. They ate the gourmet meal, which was served with agonizing, apologetic precision by a junior flight attendant Mark had sent in his stead, clearly too terrified to show his own face. Isabella laid her seat flat, covered herself with the plush duvet, and slept for 4 straight hours, the stress of the day finally melting away. James, however, didn't sleep. He opened his laptop, connected to the plane's Wi-Fi, and began to type. He wrote a long, detailed email. He sent it not to TAA's customer service, but to the personal email address of Richard Harrison, the TAA CEO, and to the entire TAA board of directors. He detailed the events, not with emotion, but with cold, hard facts. He named Karen Miller. He named Mark, whose last name he had found on the internal crew manifest. He named Alan Thompson. He described the first-class light lie, the contest winner assumption, the assault accusation in the lounge, and the final malicious act of changing their tickets to the worst seats on the plane. He attached a copy of the receipt for the 10 extra first-class seats he had purchased. He finished the email with a simple paragraph. "Mr. Harrison, the $500 million Auratech contract is not just about software. It is about partnership. And I cannot, in good conscience, partner with a company whose frontline culture is so fundamentally broken that it fosters, encourages, and even rewards public cruelty and discrimination. The deal is not just off, it is, as of this moment, dead. You will be hearing from our lawyers." He hit send. Meanwhile, in the galley, Mark was living through 7 hours of hell. He couldn't sit. He couldn't serve. He just stood, polishing glasses that were already clean, rearranging carts that were already organized. The rest of the crew, from economy and business class, would occasionally come in, their eyes wide with questions. "Is it true?" one of them whispered. "He bought the whole cabin?" Mark just nodded, his face grim. "And he's that James Matthews, the Auratech guy?" Mark nodded again. The flight attendant let out a low whistle. "Mark, you and Karen you're finished. You're not just fired. You're famous." Mark's stomach twisted. He knew it was true. This story was too good, too awful not to spread. By the time they landed, every TAA employee from London to Sydney would know his name. 2 hours before landing, the silence of the first-class cabin was broken by a soft knock on James's pod door. He opened it. It was the captain, a man with grey hair and a face etched with decades of responsibility. "Mr. Matthews?" the captain said, his voice low and respectful. "I'm Captain Evans. I have just been made aware of the situation that occurred at the gate. I was on the flight deck doing my pre-flight, or I would have intervened." "Captain," James said, nodding, "I have been on the satellite phone with TAA Corporate for the last hour. I just want to personally apologize for the despicable behavior of my crew. This is not what we stand for." "I appreciate you coming to say that, Captain," James said. "It's more than words, sir. I have been authorized to inform you of the immediate actions taken. Ms. Miller was met at the gate by airport security and TAA executives. Her employment has been terminated. She was escorted from the premises." James just nodded. "And, Mr. Mark," the captain said, his voice hardening as he glanced toward the galley, "he has been officially demoted, effective immediately. He is no longer a purser. He will be on probationary, non-customer-facing duty, cleaning duty, for the next 6 months. If he survives that, he'll be a junior attendant on domestic routes. His career, as he knew it, is over." From the galley, they heard the distinct sound of a glass shattering on the floor. "Thank you for informing me, Captain," James said. "The flight itself has been smooth. Please, give our compliments to your co-pilot." The captain nodded, relieved. "We will be landing at Heathrow in approximately 90 minutes. A TAA ground representative will be waiting for you at the jet bridge." "I'm sure they will," James said. As the captain left, Isabella, who had woken up, looked at her husband. "Fired and demoted. Just like that." "Just like that," James said. "That's the easy part. That's just punishment. It's not justice. Not yet." As TAA Flight 212 taxied toward the terminal at London Heathrow, the cabin was prepared for arrival. James and Isabella gathered their small carry-on bags. The fasten seatbelt sign turned off with a ping. "Mr. and Mrs. Matthews," a flight attendant, not Mark, said quietly. "Please take your time. You will be the first to deplane." When the jet bridge connected and the door hissed open, they were met not by an empty corridor, but by a small delegation. A woman in a sharp TAA executive suit stood at the front, her face a mask of practiced, high-level apology. "Mr. and Mrs. Matthews," she said, stepping forward. "My name is Elizabeth Cole. I am the TAA station manager for Heathrow. On behalf of our entire company, please accept our most profound and humble apologies." "Miss Cole," James said, acknowledging her with a nod, "we have arranged a private car to take you directly from the tarmac to your hotel, so you can bypass customs and baggage claim. Your luggage is already being loaded into it." She jested, and they walked down the jet bridge, past the public gate, and through a private door that led down to the tarmac. A sleek, black Mercedes Maybach was waiting, its engine purring. "Mr. Matthews," Elizabeth said, walking with them, "our CEO, Mr. Harrison, He is horrified. He is personally flying to London tonight. He will be here in the morning. He begs for a 15-minute meeting with you, at your convenience, to apologize in person, and to discuss the future of our partnership." James stopped at the open door of the Maybach. He turned to Elizabeth. "Miss Cole, the $500 million contract is not the point. I can make that money elsewhere. My wife and I can fly on other airlines. The point he said, his voice sharp, is your company's culture. You don't just have a Karen Miller problem, you have a systemic rot. Your company trains and empowers its staff to make snap judgments based on a person's appearance. You've created a culture where employees feel they have the right to humiliate passengers they deem unworthy of the service they paid for. Isabella stepped forward. What if we had been contest winners? She asked, her voice clear and strong. Would we have deserved that treatment? What if we had saved up for 2 years for one special trip, and your employees decided we didn't look the part? The way your staff behaved, it wasn't about policy. It was about cruelty. It was about making themselves feel big by making us feel small. Elizabeth Cole had no answer. She simply stood there, absorbing the truth of it. You are right, she said, finally, her corporate poise cracking. You are 100% right. Mr. Harrison, he knows it. He read your email. The contents of that email are already being drafted into a company-wide emergency directive, a top-to-bottom retraining on bias, sensitivity, and customer respect. Internally, they're already calling it the Matthews Mandate. James looked at her. Mandates are good. Actions are better. Tell Mr. Harrison I will meet with him. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at my hotel. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Thank you, Elizabeth said, breathing a sigh of visible relief. James and Isabella got into the Maybach. As the car pulled away, driving across the vast, open tarmac, Isabella saw Mark and the rest of the flight crew deplaning, heading for a standard crew bus. Mark looked small, defeated, and utterly insignificant. Just another face in a crowd, his days of power and petty cruelty over for good. The meeting the next day was not a negotiation. It was a reckoning. At 10 a.m. on the dot, Richard Harrison, the CEO of Transatlantic Air, was shown into James's penthouse suite at the Corinthia Hotel. He was a man who normally commanded rooms, exuding an aura of crisp, bespoke-suited authority. Today he looked rumpled and exhausted, his face grey with stress and lack of sleep. He had, as promised, taken the first available flight to London. James, he began, his voice hoarse. Mr. Matthews, Mrs. Matthews, I flew here to say it in person. There are no words. Sorry is a laughably small word for what you endured. It was despicable. It was a failure from top to bottom. James, who was standing by the window overlooking the Thames, didn't turn around. You're right. It is a small word, so let's not waste any more time on it. I sent that email because I was angry. But after a night's sleep, I'm no longer interested in just cancelling the contract. Harrison looked up, a desperate spark of hope in his eyes. He had spent the entire flight rehearsing how he would beg, how he would offer refunds, lifetime free flights, a public apology. He was prepared for a fight to save the $500 million deal. You're not? Harrison stammered. No, James said, finally turning to face him. That's easy. That punishes your shareholders, your pension funds, and the thousands of good employees who didn't treat my wife and me like criminals. It doesn't fix the problem. It just treats a symptom. Harrison was stunned. Then, what? What do you want? The deal is back on the table, James said. But the price has gone up, significantly. Harrison paled, his mind instantly flashing to his balance sheets. James, our margins are public. We're at our absolute limit. I can't offer. I don't want your money. James cut him off, his voice flat. It was Isabella who spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tense silence. We want a new clause in the contract, a non-negotiable addendum. We're calling it the Dignity Clause. She stood up from the sofa and walked to the center of the room. Yesterday, your employees, Miss Miller and Mr. Mark looked at my husband and me and saw, what? Thugs? Charity cases? People who won a contest? They couldn't compute that two black people, dressed comfortably, could possibly belong in first class. She locked eyes with the CEO. That's not a Karen problem, Mr. Harrison. That's a TAA problem. It's a systemic failure of imagination. So, here's the first part of the clause. TAA will immediately fund a new foundation with $50 million over the next 5 years. Harrison blinked, the number stinging him. A foundation? For people who look like us, Isabella said. I will personally establish and run it. It will be dedicated to providing educational scholarships, mentorship, and professional development opportunities for underprivileged minority youth seeking careers in aviation, technology, and hospitality. We will create a pipeline of talent. We will fund pilots, engineers, executives, and, yes, customer service agents, so that in 10 years, a black face in a premium cabin or a cockpit isn't an anomaly to be questioned. It's just normal. Harrison was floored. This wasn't a penalty. It was a cure, a long-term, structural, and brilliant solution. And the second part, James said, picking up the thread, is for you. The $500 million software we are building for you, the one to manage your logistics and booking, it's getting a new feature. He walked over to Harrison. I call it the accountability engine. It's an ethics and bias tracking algorithm. We will build it directly into your customer service mainframe. From now on, every single passenger complaint, whether from an email, a phone call, or an in-person report, that uses keywords related to discrimination, bias, racism, or unfair treatment will be tagged. It will be analyzed by our AI, and it will be compiled into a real-time, unfiltered report. A report, James continued, his voice hardening, that will not be sent to your HR department to be buried. It will be sent every Monday morning directly to your personal email, Mr. Harrison, and to the personal email of every single member of your board of directors. You will see every incident. You will see the patterns. You will see which airports, which shifts, and which employees are the problem. You can't fix what you don't measure. We are going to force you to measure it. He leaned in. And the final piece of the clause, a percentage of your entire executive team's annual bonus, including yours, will be directly tied to a measurable quarterly reduction in these incidents. You will not get paid your full bonus ever again unless these numbers go down. You will be financially incentivized to fix your broken culture. The room was silent. Harrison looked from James to Isabella. He was trapped, but he was also in awe. This wasn't revenge. This was genius. They hadn't just come to punish him. They had come with a complete, top-to-bottom business solution for the very rot that was killing his company from the inside. He stood up, not as a defeated man, but as a converted one. Yes, he said, offering his hand to James, and then to Isabella. Done. We agree to all of it. The dignity clause will be in the contract by end of day. Thank you. You have done more than save this deal. You may have just saved this company. The story of what happened at Gate B42 became the stuff of corporate legend at TAA. The Matthews mandate was implemented with terrifying speed. Every new employee, from pilots to baggage handlers, heard the story in their orientation, a stark warning about what happens when you judge a passenger by their hoodie. And what of the antagonists? Their karma was swift, complete, and devastatingly precise. Karen Miller was, as promised, terminated before Flight 212 had even crossed the Atlantic. She was blacklisted, and she discovered the airline industry is a very small world. She tried to sue TAA for wrongful termination, and gender discrimination. James's personal legal team, the same one that handled Oratech's billion-dollar acquisitions, countersued her for defamation, slander, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, citing her false assault claim. They had sworn affidavits from 3 other passengers in the lounge. Faced with financial ruin, she dropped her suit and filed for bankruptcy. The last anyone heard, she was working the night shift at a 24-hour gas station convenience store off the New Jersey Turnpike. One evening, a gleaming black Maybach pulled in. A young black man in a tailored suit got out, bought a bottle of water, and said, "Have a good night." Karen just stared, the name Matthews echoing in her head, as she was left alone again under the flickering fluorescent lights. Her world shrunk to the size of a cash register. Mark, the purser, lived through his own special hell. He was demoted to a probationary junior attendant on domestic routes, as promised. But probationary meant he got every task no one else wanted. For 11 agonizing months, his job was cleaning lavatories, wiping tray tables, and serving sodas in the last row of economy, the very row he had tried to banish James and Isabella to. He endured the whispers of every crew he flew with, the "oh, that's the guy" looks. He became a ghost, humiliated daily. The man who lived for the tiny rush of power over premium passengers couldn't stand the absolute lack of it. He had a nervous breakdown on a flight from Atlanta to Omaha and quit on the spot. He was last seen working as a shift manager at a busy Starbucks near Queens, his uniform a stained green apron, forced to smile and say, "Yes, sir," and "What can I get for you?" 100 times an hour. The bitter irony of his new life scalding him worse than any hot coffee. And Alan Thompson, the man with the $1,200 Gucci loafers, received a formal, itemized bill from Isabella's assistant for a new pair of $1,200 Brunello Cucinelli cashmere trousers, which he paid without a word. But the story got out. His own company, a rival in the finance space, heard about his behavior, the arrogance, the escalation, the casual prejudice. In a world where corporate image was everything, he was now a liability. He was called into his own CEO's office, advised that his interpersonal skills were not aligned with company values, and was strongly advised to take an early retirement package. His shoes, the ones he was so proud of, now sat in the back of his closet, a bitter reminder of the day his arrogance cost him his career. Months later, James and Isabella were in their New York apartment, overlooking a snow-dusted Central Park. Isabella was on a video call, her face lit up with a bright, proud smile. "No, Jalen, you listen to me," she was saying. "You earned this. You are one of our first Dignity Scholars, and you will be a phenomenal pilot. Don't you let anyone, ever, tell you where you belong." She ended the call and turned to James, who was on the sofa, still in one of his signature comfortable hoodies, reading a report on his laptop. "That was Jalen," Isabella said, her eyes shining. "He's starting his flight training in January." "That's fantastic," James said, smiling. He tapped his screen. "And this is fantastic. The first quarterly accountability engine report from TAA. Incidents of reported bias are down 60% across their entire North American network." 60%, Isabella whispered, walking over and wrapping her arms around his neck. "It's working." "I knew it would," James said, pulling her close. "Data doesn't lie, and executives really listen when their bonuses are on the line." "You know," Isabella said, resting her chin on his shoulder, "buying all those seats was an incredible power move. It was deeply satisfying." "It was," James agreed, closing the laptop. "But that's just power. It's loud, it's fast, and it's temporary. This," he said, gesturing to the report on his screen and then to the phone she'd just used to speak to Jalen. "This is justice. It's quiet, it's slow, and it's permanent." And that's the story of how a single act of prejudice at an airport gate didn't just lead to humiliation for the people who deserved it. It led to a $50 million investment in a new generation. James and Isabella didn't just win their battle, they started a quiet revolution. They proved that true power isn't about the clothes you wear or the money in your bank account. It's about having the strength to demand respect and the vision to turn a moment of ugly karma into a legacy of lasting change. What did you think of this story? Do you believe the karma Karen and Mark received was fitting? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories where the arrogant get what's coming to them, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama and hard karma every single week.